In the vast silence of space, the galaxy learned a hard truth. Humans don't fight to conquer. They fight to endure. This is Roman HFY. Follow the channel to stay up to date as new stories become available. Every species believes it understands war. They believe conflict follows rules, that victory belongs to the strongest fleets, the oldest empires, the most refined doctrines. For centuries, the Galactic Coalition believed the same. Then humanity arrived. They were not the strongest. They were not the oldest. They were not even considered particularly intelligent by coalition standards. They were young, short-lived, emotionally volatile, excessively attached to individuals rather than outcomes. The coalition did not invite humanity out of curiosity. They were invited because humanity had survived a war that should have erased them. No one spoke openly about that war, not because it was classified, but because no one could explain how the humans had endured it, only that they had. So humanity was granted limited access, observer status, peripheral defense assignments. They were placed where failure was expected, where loss would be acceptable. One such place was a narrow star corridor near the outer trade lanes, sparse in resources, difficult to reinforce, of minimal strategic value. Coalition planners called it non-essential. Humanity was assigned to defend it, not because they were trusted, but because no one else wanted it. The records show that when the order was issued, the human response was immediate. No objections, no political maneuvering, no demands for additional support. They acknowledged the assignment and began preparing evacuation routes. This detail was noted later. At the time, it was dismissed as human pessimism. The enemy fleet arrived 48 standard hours ahead of projections. This, too, was recorded. What followed was expected to be brief. The opposing force outnumbered the human fleet by a margin considered decisive under coalition doctrine. Their weapons were superior, their ships older, their commanders experienced in wars spanning generations. Against them stood a human admiral, Roman Weaver. Coalition analysts had little data on him. He had not distinguished himself politically. He did not seek recognition. He did not give speeches. His prior engagements were unusual, defensive actions, withdrawals that did not collapse, victories achieved without pursuit. There were concerns. Human command structures were considered unstable under sustained pressure. Their emotional attachments were predicted to compromise strategic clarity. Their casualty tolerance was believed to be dangerously high. None of these factors suggested effectiveness. The expectation was simple. When confronted with overwhelming force, the humans would retreat. They would abandon the corridor. The evacuation would be incomplete. The loss would be regrettable but manageable. This assumption was shared by both sides. The enemy commander initiated contact protocols with confidence. He prepared orders for pursuit, not resistance. The human fleet did not advance. This was noted. They also did not withdraw. That, too, was noted. They held position, silently, formation tight, power signatures steady, no broadcast signals beyond standard readiness confirmations. The enemy commander interpreted this as hesitation. Coalition observers assumed panic. No one understood the truth until much later. Humanity was not hesitating. They were not panicking. They were not confused. They were calculating something the rest of the galaxy had forgotten how to measure: time. Behind the human lines, civilian transports began moving, unarmed, slow, carrying populations that would never be recorded in strategic summaries. Families, workers, children. The human fleet absorbed the first exchange of fire without response. Ships were damaged, some were lost. The formation did not break. A second exchange followed. Still no advance, still no retreat, only endurance. At this point, Coalition Command transmitted advisory authorization for tactical withdrawal. The message was delivered directly to Admiral Roman Weaver. He acknowledged receipt. He did not execute the order. There is no record of raised voices, no recorded argument, no dramatic refusal. Only a single line entered into the command log: holding. This was the moment, historians now agree, when the galaxy made its first mistake, because humanity does not view retreat the way we do. To them, falling back is not surrender. Loss is not defeat. And holding a line is not about territory. It is about people. The battle that followed did not redefine military doctrine. It did something far worse. It redefined expectations. Because the humans were not winning. They were simply refusing to stop. and the galaxy was not prepared for what that meant. The corridor did not look like a battlefield. It was a narrow stretch of space between two trade regions that no longer mattered. Its stars were dim, its routes outdated, its infrastructure minimal. Coalition charts labeled it Peripheral Defense Corridor 17. Human crews called it the Long Watch. Admiral Roman Weaver stood at the center of the bridge aboard the flagship Resolute, hands clasped behind his back, posture relaxed in a way that suggested confidence rather than comfort. His eyes remained fixed on a tactical projection that told him everything he already knew. The numbers were bad. Enemy approach vectors converged along 3 predictable lanes. Fleet mass exceeded revised projections by nearly 40%. Time to contact had fallen below acceptable margins. None of this surprised him. "Confirm civilian transit count," Weaver said, his voice level and unhurried. The bridge crew moved immediately. 36 transports active, a navigation officer replied. Additional civilian traffic en route from the inner colonies. Evacuation remains on schedule. Weaver nodded once. No one commented on the fact that the evacuation had begun well before the enemy fleet entered sensor range. That decision had been made hours earlier, not because the corridor was doomed, but because preparation cost nothing. Failure cost lives. Coalition command traffic streamed across auxiliary displays, dense with recommendations, probability curves, and cautious optimism that the approaching force might divert if met with resistance. Weaver read none of it. Coalition doctrine treated war like mathematics. Force plus force equaled outcome. Human doctrine treated war like weather. You didn't argue with it, you didn't negotiate, you prepared to endure it. "Admiral," a tactical officer said quietly, breaking the silence. "Coalition analysts believe the enemy is posturing. They're predicting a limited probe rather than a full engagement." Weaver did not turn. "They're wrong," he said. There was no emphasis in his voice, no frustration, just certainty. Across the human line, ships adjusted position by fractions of a degree, not to advance, not to retreat, to lock together. Human vessels were not the largest in the fleet. They were not the most heavily armed, but they were built to take damage. Redundant power systems layered beneath reinforced hulls. Control pathways designed to fail slowly rather than catastrophically. Crews trained to fight without lights, without comms, without certainty. Humanity had learned these lessons early in its history, at a terrible cost. "Signal from Coalition Command," communications reported. "They're requesting confirmation of engagement intent." Weaver finally turned from the display. "Send the standard response," he said. "Acknowledged. Defensive posture confirmed. Holding corridor." The word holding lingered longer than the rest. Coalition officers disliked it. It implied stubbornness, inflexibility, a refusal to accept when equations turned unfavorable. Weaver saw something else in the word. Time. "Admiral," navigation added. "Enemy fleet entering active sensor range." On the main display, distant shapes resolved into organized formations. Too many, too clean, too confident. The enemy commander did not bother with theatrics. A transmission request followed almost immediately. Weaver studied the incoming signal for a moment. "Decline," he said. There was a pause. "Yes, sir." The enemy would interpret the silence as fear. That was acceptable. Behind the human line, civilian transports continued to move. Slow engines, minimal shielding, packed with lives that would never know Weaver's name. That was acceptable too. The first weapons discharge crossed the void seconds later. Energy flared against forward screens. One ship shuddered, another lost maneuvering thrusters. No return fire followed. The human line did not move. "Damage reports incoming," Tactical said. Weaver nodded. "Log them," he replied. "And remind the fleet." He paused, choosing the simplest words possible. "We are not here to win today." The bridge crew looked at him. "We are here," Weaver continued, voice steady, "to make sure everyone else gets to leave." The enemy commander fired again. The humans still did not retreat, and for the first time, something unfamiliar entered the enemy's calculations. Confusion. The enemy commander had expected fear. He had seen it before, in dozens of engagements against younger species. It always appeared the same way. A subtle widening of formations, a fractional delay in response times, the quiet chaos of crews realizing they were no longer in control of the situation. The human fleet displayed none of it. From the command deck of his flagship, the commander observed the opposing vessels with professional detachment. Their designs were compact and utilitarian, lacking the sweeping hull lines favored by older civilizations. There was no obvious command ship set apart for honor or visibility. Instead, the human ships were clustered tightly together, uncomfortably so. "Confirm identification," he ordered. "Human Defense Fleet," his sensor officer replied. "Local command authority only. No coalition battle group signatures detected." A ripple of approval passed quietly through the command deck. "So," the commander said, "they have been assigned the expendable front." This was familiar territory. Peripheral species were often given defensive assignments they were never expected to survive. It was efficient. It preserved veteran fleets for conflicts that truly mattered. The humans would recognize this reality soon enough. "Open a channel," he said. "Initiate standard pre-engagement protocol." The transmission request crossed the void. No response followed. The commander waited. Seconds passed. Then more. "Repeat the request," he said. Again, silence. The human fleet did not shift formation, did not realign weapons, did not respond in any visible way. They simply remained where they were, holding. "Perhaps they have not received it," one of his advisors suggested. "No," the commander replied slowly. "They have received it." He leaned closer to the tactical display. "Confused fleets betray themselves quickly," he continued. "These ships are steady." Energy readings confirmed it. Their systems were active but restrained. Weapons primed but not charged for sustained offense. Engines held at readiness without acceleration. They were prepared, just not for what the commander expected. "Fire a ranging shot," he ordered. "Forward element only, minimal yield." The command was executed without hesitation. A lance of energy tore across the corridor and struck the outer edge of the human formation. Shields flared brightly. One vessel shuddered, its power signature dropping before stabilizing at reduced capacity. Still, the humans did not return fire. A second later, damage reports confirmed structural compromise. The human line did not move. Irritation crept into the commander's thoughts. "They should have repositioned," he said. "Even inferior fleets understand the value of space." Another volley followed. More damage, more human losses, still no retaliation. Only now did something unfamiliar begin to intrude upon the commander's certainty. Not fear, uncertainty. Long-range scans updated. Behind the human formation, faint engine signatures emerged. Civilian vessels, unarmed, poorly shielded, slow, evacuation traffic. "They are still moving non-combatants," the sensor officer reported. "Evacuation is incomplete." The commander stared at the data. "They are defending an active evacuation?" he asked. "Yes, Commander." The concept was inefficient. Evacuation doctrine dictated withdrawal before engagement, or not at all. Attempting both simultaneously wasted resources and lives, unless the goal was not survival, unless the goal was time. "They are not holding territory," the commander said quietly. The realization settled heavily over the command deck. "They are holding time." Another transmission request was sent. Declined. The humans did not threaten, did not posture, did not explain. They absorbed damage and remained. The commander ordered a broader volley. Human ships began to fail. One lost propulsion, another vented atmosphere. A third went dark entirely, yet the formation held. "They are not retreating," an advisor said, disbelief evident in his tone. The commander said nothing, because for the first time in his long career he was witnessing a species fight a battle they had already accepted they might lose. Not for victory, not for territory, but for people who would never be remembered in any official record. And as the human line endured under fire, the commander understood something far more troubling than resistance. He was watching an enemy willing to pay any price, as long as it bought one more moment. The battle did not accelerate. It settled. The enemy commander had expected escalation. A reckless human counterattack. A desperate surge meant to break contact or create an opening for retreat. That was how lesser species behaved when confronted with superior force. The humans did neither. Instead, the engagement deepened into something far more unsettling. Endurance. Human ships absorbed fire and remained. They shifted only when required. They closed ranks when one faltered. From the command deck of his flagship, the commander watched the human formation respond to damage with disturbing cohesion. Vessels adjusted position by instinct rather than command, redistributing shield coverage and hull stress as if the losses had been anticipated. because they had. This pattern is inefficient, an advisor said carefully. They are losing ships faster than projected sustainability allows. Yes, the commander replied. They should be collapsing. They were not. Concentrate fire, he ordered. Break the center. Remove their cohesion. Energy tore into the heart of the human line. One ship failed catastrophically, vanishing in a silent flare that left no debris. Another lost propulsion, drifting helplessly as its hull burned. A third vented atmosphere before emergency bulkheads sealed the breach. The human formation closed around the gaps. The line did not break. On the bridge of the Resolute, damage reports scrolled continuously. Fires burned on multiple decks. Artificial gravity fluctuated as auxiliary systems struggled to compensate for mounting losses. Admiral Roman Weaver stood unmoving. "Reassign point defense," he said calmly. "Route auxiliary power to ships shielding evacuation vectors. Rotate damaged hulls inward." Each order was acknowledged. Each was executed. No one questioned the cost. Crew evacuation pods launched from crippled ships under active fire, scooped up by neighboring vessels that absorbed additional damage to protect them. Damage control teams worked in vacuum, sealing breaches by hand where automation had failed. No panic entered the comms. No request to retreat was voiced. Across the corridor, unease spread through the enemy command deck. "They are sacrificing units without hesitation," an advisor said. "This level of loss should compromise morale." "They are not behaving like a fleet," the commander replied slowly. "They are behaving like a barrier." The realization unsettled him. Doctrine taught that barriers broke, barriers collapsed. Nothing sustained pressure indefinitely. Yet the humans were not defending territory. They were defending moments. Each destroyed ship forced the enemy fleet to slow. Each human loss bought minutes. Those minutes were being spent elsewhere. Long-range scans updated again. Behind the human line, civilian traffic thinned. Transport after transport slipped through the narrowing corridor, escaping while the human fleet bled. "They are succeeding," the commander said quietly. An advisor turned to him. "But commander, they are losing." "Yes," he replied, "and they know it." That was the problem. On the Resolute, a console detonated in a shower of sparks, throwing an officer to the deck. Weaver stepped forward, steadying him with one hand, guiding him clear without breaking focus. "Damage control will handle that," Weaver said. "Stay with your station." "Admiral," Tactical reported, strain evident. "Enemy firepower remains overwhelming. Coalition Command advises fallback before fleet integrity collapses." Weaver acknowledged the message without comment. "Status of evacuation?" he asked instead. "Nearly complete," came the reply. Weaver exhaled once. "Then we hold," he said. Outside, another human ship went dark. The formation tightened, and across the battlefield, the enemy commander understood something his doctrine had never prepared him for. He was not facing an enemy trying to win. He was facing an enemy that had already decided what it was willing to lose, and would not stop until the price had been paid. Endurance has a price. It is not paid all at once. It is not dramatic. It is paid quietly, in moments that never appear in after-action reports. On the lower decks of the Resolute, Jordan Paul worked by the light of emergency panels, his console flickering as power rerouted again and again. He no longer remembered when the first alarm had sounded, only that it had never truly stopped. "Power fluctuation on grid 3, a technician called out. "I see it," Jordan replied, fingers moving across the interface. "Route reserve capacity through the auxiliary bus. It won't hold long." "It doesn't have to," the technician said. "Just long enough." Jordan nodded, though no one was looking. That had become the unspoken refrain, just long enough. The ship groaned around them, metal stressed beyond tolerances it had never been designed to endure. Gravity wavered, dropping for a fraction of a second before stabilizing again. Somewhere, far above, another deck lost atmosphere. Jordan did not check the casualty reports. He knew better. Instead, he focused on numbers, power loads, life support thresholds, evacuation timing. If the numbers stayed balanced, people lived. If they didn't, someone didn't. Across the fleet, the same calculus played out in 100 variations. Crews worked with burned hands and fractured bones, sealing hull breaches with improvised materials, rerouting systems through pathways that would never pass inspection in peacetime. No one complained. There was no time. A status update flickered across Jordan's display. Evacuation progress, 93% complete. He felt something tighten in his chest. Almost. On the bridge, Admiral Weaver listened as reports came in, each one quieter than the last. Ship Valiant lost, Tactical said. Acknowledged. Ship Mercy disabled. Crew evacuated. Acknowledged. Each loss was recorded, each acknowledged, none discussed. Weaver knew every name. He did not allow himself to linger on them. The enemy fire slackened briefly, not out of mercy, out of recalculation. From the opposing flagship, the enemy commander watched the human formation deteriorate under sustained pressure. Hulls were scarred, power signatures dimmed, entire vessels were gone, and yet the barrier remained. They are reaching the limit of structural integrity, an advisor reported. Continued engagement will destroy the remaining fleet. The commander stared at the tactical display. Yes, he said slowly, but not before the evacuation completes. Silence followed. They are willing to lose everything, another advisor said. No, the commander replied. They are willing to lose what they have. The distinction unsettled him. The withdrawal order should have felt like victory. From the enemy flagship, the commander watched as his fleet eased pressure, weapons cycling down from sustained fire. Tactical projections recalculated instantly, replacing destruction curves with disengagement vectors. By every measurable standard, the engagement was over, and yet nothing about it felt complete. The human fleet did not pursue, did not signal, did not celebrate. They remained where they were, still holding. The commander studied the remains of the formation, ships scarred beyond recognition, power signatures flickering at survival thresholds, vessels held together by nothing more than redundant systems and stubborn design. Any other fleet would have fled long ago. Why? He asked quietly. No one answered. He replayed the battle from the beginning, slowing it, isolating decisions, reviewing moments where doctrine predicted collapse. Collapse never came. Because the humans had never intended to outlast the enemy. They had intended to outlast the need to fight. Bring up evacuation telemetry again, he ordered. The data appeared instantly. All civilian transports accounted for, all non-combatants clear of the corridor. The commander felt something shift inside him. This had never been about space, never about control, never about victory. The humans had not been defending a position. They had been defending an absence. A future where those people were not here to die. They accepted their losses before the first shot, the commander said slowly. An advisor looked at him. They planned for it. Yes, he replied. They planned to endure it. Doctrine taught that morale collapsed when loss exceeded tolerance, that fear eventually outweighed discipline, that survival instinct always asserted itself. Humanity had rewritten that equation. Their survival instinct was not individual. It was collective. On the Resolute, silence settled across the bridge as systems stabilized at minimal operational capacity. Fires were contained. Casualty lists finalized. Admiral Weaver remained at his station. Fleet status, he said. Combat ineffective, Tactical replied, but functional. Weaver nodded. Good, he said. That's enough. No cheer followed, no relief, only exhaustion. Across the void, the enemy commander authorized full disengagement. As his fleet turned away, he transmitted a final message, not to the humans, but to coalition observers who had watched the engagement in stunned silence. This species does not fight to win, the message read. They fight to ensure someone else survives. The implication rippled outward. Humanity could not be intimidated the way others were, could not be pressured into retreat by cost alone, could not be broken by loss, because they decided what mattered before the battle began. On the battlefield, the human fleet finally began to drift apart, formation loosening as damaged ships were stabilized and survivors accounted for. They did not chase the retreating enemy. They did not mark the victory. They simply endured the aftermath. Later, much later, alien strategists would study this engagement obsessively. They would label it a defensive success, a tactical anomaly, a statistical outlier. They would miss the point. Humans did not hold the line because they believed they could win. They held it because running would have meant abandoning people who trusted them. And that was something humanity simply did not do. Not then, not ever. The message arrived without urgency. No alert tone cut through the bridge. No priority marker forced attention. It appeared quietly among damage reports and casualty tallies, routed through channels already saturated with the consequences of hours of sustained combat. Admiral Roman Weaver read it once, then again. The language was precise, carefully constructed, every word chosen to protect the institution that sent it. Coalition Command authorizes discretionary withdrawal at local commander's judgment. Asset preservation is advised. Strategic reevaluation pending. Permission, not an order. Weaver understood the intent immediately. If he withdrew now, the record would show prudence. Losses would be attributed to unfavorable conditions. The corridor would be marked abandoned, the evacuation labeled incomplete but unavoidable. No blame would follow. History would soften the edges. Weaver closed the message and did not acknowledge receipt. The bridge of the Resolute was dim, lit by emergency panels and the dull glow of overworked displays. The air carried the sharp scent of scorched circuitry and recycled oxygen pushed well beyond recommended limits. Crew members moved with practiced efficiency, exhaustion etched into every motion. The fleet was no longer combat-capable by any formal definition. Weaver knew that too. "Admiral," Tactical said carefully. "Coalition Command is awaiting confirmation of intent." Weaver did not look away from the tactical display. "How many transports remain?" he asked. A pause followed as the data was confirmed. "One," navigation replied. "Final civilian vessel is clearing the corridor now." Weaver inclined his head slightly. The bridge waited. The coalition message remained unanswered. "Sir," communications added, voice low, "withdrawal authorization remains open." Weaver turned at last. There was no anger in his expression, no visible strain, only a calm resolve that unsettled those who saw it. "We accepted this assignment," he said, with full knowledge of what it meant. No one spoke. "We were placed here because the corridor was considered expendable," Weaver continued, "because the people behind it were too distant to matter." He gestured toward the display, where civilian traffic indicators blinked faintly at the edge of sensor range. "They mattered to us." An officer swallowed. "Sir," Tactical said, "fleet integrity is compromised. Continued engagement risks total loss." "Yes," Weaver replied evenly, "it does." Silence stretched across the bridge. "We do not leave while responsibility remains," he said, "and we do not transfer that responsibility upward when the cost becomes uncomfortable." "Coalition Command will demand justification," communications warned. Weaver nodded. "They will receive it." He activated the fleet-wide channel. "This is Admiral Weaver," he said, voice carrying without force. "Evacuation is nearly complete. Maintain formation. Redistribute power where possible. Do not pursue. Do not withdraw." A beat. Then deliberately, "We will hold." Across the battered remains of the human fleet, acknowledgments returned. Brief, steady, unquestioning. They did not cheer. They did not hesitate. The coalition never issued a direct order to retreat. They did not want the moment recorded as theirs. They allowed Roman Weaver to carry it alone. He accepted that burden without ceremony. Because this was not about orders, it was about obligation, and that was what he was here for. The official record was compiled weeks later. By then, the corridor had been cleared, debris fields cataloged, survivor counts finalized, strategic maps quietly redrawn to reflect a reality no one had anticipated. Coalition historians classified the engagement as a defensive action with anomalous outcomes. They struggled with the language. Human forces had not achieved tactical superiority. They had not destroyed the opposing fleet. They had not secured the corridor in any lasting sense. And yet, the evacuation was complete. Every civilian transport had escaped. No further pursuit had been attempted. The enemy fleet withdrew without issuing demands or claims of victory, its commanders submitting unusually restrained after-action reports that focused less on losses and more on observations. This alone unsettled the coalition. Council chambers convened in closed session. Strategic analysts replayed sensor logs in silence, watching again as human ships failed one by one without triggering collapse. They noted the absence of retreat signals. They noted the refusal to disengage even when permission was granted. They noted the words that appeared repeatedly in human communications logs. Holding. Coalition doctrine had no equivalent term. The enemy commander's final report was circulated under restricted access. It contained no condemnation, no accusations of irrational behavior, only a single assessment, recorded without embellishment. Human forces demonstrated a casualty tolerance beyond predictive models. Resistance persisted until non-combatant evacuation objectives were met. Recommend re-evaluation of engagement assumptions. This recommendation was not ignored. Humanity's classification was quietly revised. No announcement was made, no ceremony held. They were simply no longer listed among peripheral defense contributors. They were moved. Strategic planners adjusted risk calculations when human fleets were present. Diplomatic envoys altered tone and language in future negotiations. Military advisors inserted new warnings into engagement briefs. Human forces may not disengage when expected. Human objectives may not align with territorial control. Human commanders may accept losses deemed unacceptable by coalition standards. These notes spread quickly, unofficially. Among junior officers and veteran strategists alike, a different understanding took hold. Humans could not be pressured the way others could. They did not measure victory the same way. They chose what mattered before the battle began, and they did not revise that choice once the cost became clear. Admiral Roman Weaver declined all commendations. He submitted his report without commentary. When questioned about his refusal to withdraw, he offered no defense beyond operational necessity. The coalition did not pursue the matter. They had already learned enough. Because this engagement did not make humanity famous, it did something far more dangerous. It taught the galaxy that if humans ever chose to fight without restraint, if they ever stopped holding lines for others, if they ever decided that survival alone was no longer enough, then no doctrine in the stars would be sufficient to stop them. This was not the battle that made humanity famous. It was the one that made the galaxy afraid of what would happen if humans ever stopped holding back.